The night was once again marked by a faint, rhythmic sound coming from beyond the wall. At first, I wondered what it was, but I quickly realized it was the kind of sound that could only come from a couple. I frowned and turned over in bed, but no matter how I turned, the sound pierced through. The woman's low, almost pure sound, the man's husky voice, and the strangely tense intervals between them. Even through the thin wall, it was too clear. "Oh, what in the world are those people doing?" I muttered to myself, a mix of annoyance and embarrassment. At first, I deliberately tried to drown it out by turning on the TV and running the water. But that didn't change anything. It just made me more conscious of the sound. Then, at some point, I just started listening. The more I tried not to listen, the clearer it became. And the clearer it became, the more dazed I felt. I can't even remember which night it was. It became a habit. When that time came, I would lie facing the wall. If I didn't hear it, I felt empty. But if I did, I felt uneasy. Maybe it wasn't just a sound, but something that had stirred a sleeping sensation within me. I first ran into her in the hallway that day. I was heading up after work and met her at the corner of the stairs. She was a woman in a gray tracksuit with her hair tied back. I could have just passed by, but my eyes immediately stopped. Her skin was pale, her expression clear, and even without makeup, her face was strangely distinct. The slight dark circles under her eyes made her look tired, but that drew my attention even more. Her figure was immediately apparent. Although her clothes were loose, her waistline and shoulder line were pretty, and my gaze kept returning to her. I unconsciously avoided her eyes, but she spoke first, greeting me. "Hello, I live next door." The moment I heard those words, something became clear in my mind. Ah, that's the woman, beyond the wall. Her voice tone, the lingering warmth of her breath, my ears reacted strangely first. "Yes, hello," I think I replied awkwardly. She smiled briefly and then walked up the stairs. Listening to her footsteps behind me, a strange feeling arose in my chest. That night, her apartment was silent. Strangely, that made me more nervous. I didn't turn on the TV, and I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the wall. My ears were glued to that wall for a long time, hearing nothing. For a few days, it was quiet, beyond the wall. When that familiar rhythm didn't appear at the usual time, it felt odd. They must just be tired today, I initially thought. But the next day and the day after were the same. From then on, I started to feel a little uneasy. Funnily enough, I was most uncomfortable with the fact that I was waiting for that sound. "What is this?" I mumbled, but my words lost their conviction. Then, late one weekend afternoon, I ran into her again in the shared laundry room. Standing in front of the washing machine, her hair was a little messy and there was fatigue in her eyes. She was holding a laundry basket, and I could see her slender ankles through the running pants that had slipped down to her knees. It would have been awkward because it was so quiet, so I spoke first. "You look a bit tired lately." She paused for a moment and then gave a slight smile. "My husband travels a lot these days. All the housework falls to me." For some reason, my stomach fluttered subtly at her words. Ah, she's alone. That single phrase lingered with me for a long time. Seeing her up close, she looked more fragile than I expected. Her arms were thin, and her cheeks were clear, almost devoid of oiliness. My eyes kept drifting downwards. The t-shirt, slightly damp with sweat, clung to her back, revealing the line of her shoulders. I noticed myself staring and quickly turned my head. She pretended not to notice and turned her attention back to the washing machine, and I stared intently at the floor. It was strange. We hadn't said anything, but it felt like something had passed between us. I watched her walking up the stairs. Her slow steps, her slumped shoulders. She looked exhausted. That image stayed with me for a long time. That night was still quiet. I didn't put my ear to the wall, but the quietness felt even bigger. In the stillness, I strangely kept thinking of her. Her voice, her waistline, her tired expression. Even though nothing had happened, it was a night where I wasn't alone in a strange way. That day it rained particularly hard. I was walking back from the grocery store, rounding the corner of the alley with my umbrella, when I saw a familiar figure standing by the convenience store, a woman holding a shopping bag, seeking shelter from the rain. Her white t-shirt was soaked and clung to her body, and wet hair was flowing down her neck. I knew it was Suyeon immediately. I hesitated about whether to speak to her, but approached quietly. "Don't you have an umbrella?" She looked up, her eyes wide. "Oh no, it came so suddenly. I guess I was just spacing out." Her small smile was strangely lively despite her face being wet. "Let's go together." I tilted the umbrella toward her, and we naturally started walking, shoulder to shoulder. It was a little awkward at first, but after a few steps, we walked side by side in silence. The sound of the rain beneath the small umbrella and the subtle warmth radiating from her arm were strangely comforting. When we reached the stairs, she spoke softly. "Thank you. I really didn't expect someone to feel so warm on a cold day like this." After getting back inside, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A while later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a bottle of wine was in a bag. A short note was written on a post-it. "Thank you for keeping the rain off me." That night, I placed the wine bottle on the table and stared at it several times. Finally, I sent a text message. "This wine is too good to drink alone." The reply didn't take long. "Then, shall we drink it together tonight?" That's how she entered my apartment for the first time. Taking off her slippers, she said cautiously, "Ah, it smells good. It feels warm. It's a bit messy. I don't tidy up much when I'm alone." I poured the wine, making casual small talk, but we both knew it. We knew, not through words, but through another sense, that we were already on the verge of crossing a line. She held her wine glass and looked out the window, standing very close beside me. After a long silence, she spoke. "You know this wall is thin, right?" I nodded slightly. Yes, I could hear everything. She didn't laugh or look embarrassed. Instead, she silently took a sip of her wine, and as she did, her eyes slowly turned toward mine. That night, the wine glasses were emptied, and we gradually grew closer in silence. It was only then that I realized the rain had stopped. After that day, I saw her more often. In front of the laundry room, by the mailboxes, at the entrance to the convenience store. Our paths strangely crossed with increasing frequency. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but eventually, I found myself waiting for her unconsciously. I even developed a habit of leaving the house at the same time as her. She didn't seem awkward about it. If anything, she seemed more natural. Her silent smile, her voice softly saying, "Thank you," when I occasionally held the door for her. I kept thinking about her. Then, one evening, I was cleaning up after getting home from work when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, she was standing there holding a cake box. "You said it was your birthday today, didn't you?" "Oh, right." She had remembered a casual remark I'd made a few days ago while we were drinking wine. "I just wanted to drop by to say hello since you might be alone." Even as she said that, she walked inside, and I naturally pulled 2 cans of beer from the refrigerator. The lighting was low, and we sat facing each other with the cake on the coffee table in front of the sofa. She smiled slightly after taking a bite of the cake, and I found myself smiling back. A moment of silence fell, and in that instant, her knee lightly touched my leg. At first I thought it was an accident, but she didn't look up, and her knee stayed put. My whole body tensed as I held my breath. I felt like I should say something, but no words came to mind, and she quietly took a sip of her beer. Those few seconds of silence felt like minutes. My fingertips tingled, and my mind was a mess. In that moment, I spoke softly. "It's late. I'll walk you home." She lowered her head for a moment, then quietly stood up, saying, "Thank you." We walked side by side to her door without saying a word. When we stood in front of her door, she quietly said, "It's strange, isn't it? I don't know why I'm like this either." I nodded. "Me neither." She didn't smile. She simply opened the door and went inside. The sound of her door closing lingered in my ears that night. And only then could I take a deep breath. For several days, I didn't see her face. Even when I timed my departures or opened the mailbox unnecessarily, it was quiet. I felt inexplicably empty. I wondered if I should have said something more. I even thought about asking her to stay a little longer that night. And then it was the very next day. I got home a little later than usual. As I got off the elevator, a message popped up on my phone. "It's quiet tonight, isn't it? If you have time, would you like to come over for a glass of wine?" It was her. I didn't reply. I just knocked on her door. The door opened quickly, and Suyeon was standing inside in her slippers. She was wearing a comfortable knit dress, and the soft fabric subtly revealed the line of her shoulders and the contours of her body. I opened the wine. "I know you don't like it cold," she said, walking toward the kitchen. I quietly took off my shoes and stepped inside. Her apartment was tidier than I expected, and warm lighting gently filled the living room. 2 wine glasses, some well-arranged cheese, and a half-burnt candle were on the table. "My husband is still on his business trip," she said, handing me a glass. "When I'm alone, I tend to overthink things." I didn't ask what she was thinking about. I just raised my glass and met her eyes. As we finished the second glass, she brought a blanket and sat down on the sofa. "Please sit here. The floor is cold." I carefully sat next to her, and our shoulders naturally touched. A brief silence. That quietness seemed to say everything. She suddenly asked, "Hyunwoo, do you think I'm strange?" I slowly shook my head. "No, you're probably just lonely, aren't you?" She didn't smile. Instead, she lowered her gaze, let out a small sigh, and placed her hand on the back of mine. Her hand was warm, and very slowly, she enveloped my hand with hers. When I turned my head, she was looking at me too. Her eyes connected with me before any words could. I slowly leaned my head closer, and she didn't pull away. When our lips first met, it felt like all sound had stopped. She pulled back slightly and said, "I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I couldn't stop thinking about you." I didn't answer. Instead, I gently wrapped my arms around her waist, and she quietly rested her head on my shoulder. That night, no promises were made, but we were sharing each other's warmth. In the late hour, in the dimly lit living room, we exchanged emotions in silence. And those emotions didn't stop, gradually growing deeper. Sitting side by side on her sofa, after setting down our wine glasses, we barely spoke. Only a single stand lamp was on in the dark living room, and we looked at each other in the soft light. We sat still for a long time, our shoulders touching. And at some point, she quietly took my hand. I could feel her fingertips trembling, and my heart reacted to that subtle tremor. She said, "It's so quiet tonight. That made me a little scared." The quiet can be scarier sometimes. We looked at each other and paused for a moment, as if catching our breath. She made the first move. Slowly, very carefully, she leaned her head against my shoulder. At that moment, our breaths were close, and I didn't hesitate to hold her hand tighter. When I turned my body slightly to face her, she was looking at me too. Our lips were very close, and I didn't want to miss this chance again. The kiss began quietly. Slowly and very deeply, it continued. Her 2 hands moved up to the back of my neck, and I gently pulled her waist closer. Every movement was natural, and emotion was far ahead of any words. She whispered very softly, "There's no one here right now." At those words, I closed my eyes, and I didn't stop anymore. On the sofa, we felt each other's body heat, and time quietly slipped toward dawn. Her breath touched my neck, and my fingertips moved very slowly along her back. That night, we communicated with warmth instead of words. It was still raining outside, but inside the room, it was wonderfully warm. We were clearly crossing the line, and there was no hesitation left in crossing it. Everything changed after that day. When I woke up in the morning, the silence beyond the wall made me wonder if it had all been a dream. But the warmth lingering on my hand, her face more vivid than memory, it was real. I couldn't concentrate at work, and she came to mind suddenly while I was drinking coffee. The phone vibrated quietly every night. My heart beat 2 or 3 times faster at a simple message. "Did you get home safely?" "I'm just lying here, not thinking about anything today." She still spoke softly, and every one of her words stuck in my mind. I went to her place a couple more times after that day. The lights were always low, and we spent the nights quietly holding our drinks, leaning into each other's warmth. Each time I mumbled to myself, "This is just because we're lonely. Everyone can be like this." But those words felt increasingly hollow. I ran into her at the grocery store. This time, she wasn't alone. A man was standing next to her, and she looked slightly startled when our eyes met. "Ah, this is my husband." The man bowed politely, and I forced a smile and greeted him. We talked for less than a minute, but during that brief time, my fingertips felt frozen. She was the first to look away, and she walked off with the man. I stood in front of the supermarket entrance for a long time. Watching her figure disappear, I asked myself what I was doing. That night, it was very quiet beyond the wall, but around 1 a.m., my phone screen flickered and a message came from her. "It was quiet today, wasn't it?" I couldn't reply immediately. Instead, I gently put the phone down and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The silence felt unfamiliar, and in that quiet, I felt strangely more lonely. The man I ran into at the grocery store a few days ago. After that day, I started coming home a little later and became more sensitive to the sounds coming from beyond the window. The sounds beyond the wall started up again, low laughter, the scraping of furniture, and at night, the familiar rhythm returned. It wasn't as regular as before, but it was a clear sign that it was back. I felt angry listening to the sound. It was ridiculous. That was her husband, and their home was originally a space for two people to live together. But strangely, those sounds felt like they were pushing me away. Sitting alone and drinking beer, the moment the sound accelerated, I turned up the volume on the television. I wanted to plug my ears. But what was more sensitive than my ears were the emotions that had awakened inside me. Of all days, I didn't hear from her that night. I didn't realize how empty it would feel not to have a single notification. And the next night, the phone quietly vibrated. "Can you come out for just a moment?" Light spring rain was still falling outside, and I opened the door without hesitation. She was standing under the street lamp at the entrance to the alley, without an umbrella. "Why are you out alone in the rain?" I asked as I approached. She quietly replied, "I feel too complicated when I'm at home." I held the umbrella over her, and we began to walk side by side. The smell of the rain and her body heat mixed beneath the umbrella. Though we spoke little, we were drawing closer, step by step. Just the brush of our fingertips felt like my breath stopped for a moment. I carefully asked, "Are you all right?" She tilted her head back and looked up at the rain. I just wanted to stop thinking for a while. In that moment, I tilted the umbrella more, and our shoulders were almost touching. In that small proximity, she didn't say a word, but all her words were contained within that quietness. We kept walking in silence. We walked slowly, stepping on the wet ground under the streetlights, sheltering from the rain on one side and holding on to each other on the other. She spoke first. "Hyunwoo, where do you want to go?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned into the alley and stopped beneath the sign of a quiet motel. She didn't look up next to me, and I didn't feel like words were necessary at that moment either. Under the small green light, we opened the door and walked in side by side. The room was warm and the windows were completely fogged up. She took off her coat first, dried her wet hair with her fingertips, and said, "I know I'll regret this later, right?" I looked into her eyes for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Maybe." She quietly lowered her head and slowly sat on the edge of the bed. I sat next to her, and once again, we sat facing each other without saying anything. All emotions were exchanged through our eyes. I was the first to reach out and wrap my hand around the back of hers, and she didn't let go. That hand, then our lips, and then our bodies began to lean into each other. The embrace lengthened, our breaths grew closer, and I slowly lowered her onto the bed. She quietly closed her eyes, and I very carefully lay down on top of her. Our movements were slow, and everything proceeded without words. She spoke in a slightly trembling voice. "Hyunwoo, I'm so scared right now." I gently stroked her cheek and said, "It's okay. I am too." And in that fear, we held each other tightly. As the night deepened, we became two people connected by nothing but loneliness, without any promises. After that day, I didn't hear from her. I opened and closed the text message window several times, but nothing popped up. Her profile picture was the same, and her status message was stuck on "Wants a quiet day," just as it had been for days. The wall next door was also quiet. There was a time when I was used to that silence, but now the quietness only made me feel uneasy. For several days, as I climbed the stairs on my way home from work and passed her door, the air felt strangely unfamiliar. And then, that day, a small paper bag was left in front of my door. Inside were a half-empty bottle of wine and a handwritten note on white paper. "Thank you, and I'm sorry. I'll remember this for a long time." It was her handwriting. My heart sank deep down inside. I considered knocking on the door, but in that moment, I knew. The move was already complete. That night, the wall next door was unbelievably quiet. Even though there was no sound to anticipate and no reason to strain my ears, I kept looking at the wall. After she moved out, this apartment felt strangely more unfamiliar. The familiar alley, the repeating sounds, even the air in the hallway I passed every day, it all felt different. Most of all, the most unfamiliar thing was the shadow of that woman remaining within me. I quietly placed the wine bottle on the table and stared at it for a long time. The time I had spent with her made this quiet space feel even louder. Without a word, she disappeared from my life, just like that. After that day, I am alone again. But the person who waited for the sound beyond the wall no longer felt like me. That's all for today's story. If anyone has watched until the end, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment saying, "I enjoyed listening." That would truly be a great source of strength for me. Thank you.